Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So Derek and I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening because Rumbleminze has just released as of 2 days ago his Double Dragon 2 SNES port, bringing the Nintendo original over to the Super Nintendo with a ton of quality of life improvements and a full MSU1 soundtrack. And I would say of all the new soundtracks I've heard for all of these ports from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, Double Dragon 2 100% is the best music I've ever heard in that MSU1 format. Before you get too far involved, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And I apologize in advance if my voice sounds a little bit off today. I managed to catch a cold over the 3-day holiday weekend, but I felt good enough to come into the office and talk about this amazing new Double Dragon 2 SNES port. And that's just January in Chicago. Definitely always get a cold because it is -4 degrees outside right now, so we're going to heat things up with some Double Dragon 2. Not a bad segue for being sick after all. And honestly, every single one of these NES to Super Nintendo MSU1 ports has been a ton of fun, but I would say Double Dragon 2 takes the cake as far as the overall quality of life improvements. Off the top, you're going to get that brand new MSU1 soundtrack. You're going to be able to beat the game on every single difficulty. It's going to combine some buttons for the 4-button controller of the SNES, but the best part is you're going to be able to continue without having to use any codes whatsoever, so it's going to be a lot more enjoyable experience, because as good as Double Dragon 2 is, it would absolutely kill you in every single way possible back in the day. Completing the game could be a challenge and sometimes an unfair challenge, so the fact that you can continue when you run out of your lives is 100% a great thing, because honestly, I don't really lose many lives to the enemies. I lose them by falling off the actual structure around me. It is the easiest way to die. Now, I normally do soundtrack samples around the 4.5 minute mark, but go ahead and listen to this soundtrack sample. It sounds like something that Kojima would have done for Snatcher or Police Knots. It is the absolute best. I mean, I've heard a lot of soundtracks brought over to MSU1 support on a Super Nintendo core or on real hardware, and they're all fun in their own right, but there's something about that synthesized saxophone in there, that overall 80s vibe going on, just sounds like an absolute banger of a track with MSU1 sound support. And it's not like the original soundtrack was in any way, shape, or form bad, but this is a game where I 100% feel like the MSU1 sound is just bringing so much more to the table. But the good thing is, you can absolutely go ahead in the menu and turn off every single MSU1 track you want to, so you can have the original soundtrack as well, just playing this on the Super Nintendo. As you come into the second stage here, I absolutely love how good this looks on MiSTer FPGA the way I am playing it, but it is confirmed to work on software emulation. You can play it on real hardware as well if you have a flash cartridge that supports MSU1 chips, and that is the nice thing. This game is an absolute classic. It is a ton of fun, but it definitely, in its original incantation, had a couple issues, and definitely that inability to continue without a code would absolutely drive you nuts, because I would say Double Dragon 2 can be a little bit cheap, all due to that falling death damage. But here, having basically solved that minus the fact that you do die when you fall, it is a way better experience playing this game, and that's what these ports really do. It's not just a technical showcase to show you, hey, you can port a Nintendo game over to Super Nintendo. It is also to make the game quote-unquote better, or have those quality of life improvements, because you'll see right here, and this is my fault, I forgot that that bomb had dropped, didn't notice it. I get knocked off the roof and I lose an entire life. You can lose 2-3 lives just to some very difficult jumps in this game, and then you have to go basically back to the title screen unless you put in the continue code, which is a very weird thing. But remember, these games are not very long to beat, and obviously they wanted to kind of prevent the rental market so that you couldn't just rent the game, play it for 25 minutes, beat it, and then basically never buy a copy. So that's kind of what happened in the NES and even Super Nintendo days. So developers like Rumbleminze come in and not just port the game, but bring so many different improvements over while they do it, and that is just an absolute blast. When you have a game as good as something like Double Dragon 2, there really aren't any complaints about having it on another platform. And do remember, the original Double Dragon has also been ported. But here's your second soundtrack sample. I love it, and I'll be right back with more. I chose that sound sample there not just because it has great music, but you can hear how the sound effects are still the original. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump in the water here twice so I can eliminate all of my lives. Definitely something you wouldn't want to do in real gameplay, but it is good for the video example. You will see here I end up gaming over and I have the continue screen available right now. Just go ahead and hit start twice and you're right back to the level you started at and where you died with a fresh collection of lives. And that is definitely one of my favorite improvements in the game. But again, this game has so much style, so much substance, is one of my favorite Double Dragon games. I love that golden hour sunset in the back, the blues, and those kind of pastel purples along with the rust colors. They really just do tell a story. Even that pseudo shading there where you just have that different color on the ground to basically make it look like that building is casting a shadow. It is so effective, and that is what's so good about pixel art from back in the day. Obviously there were no real-time light sources here. It was all done in 2D art, but this game really does a great job of emulating that shadow and light casting to the point in time in which you really do feel like there is an active light source in the game. Even some of the parallax scrolling here where you have your character behind some of these sprites just looks so good. And I would say this is definitely a slower paced game, but it is a very good one for being that. This is more what original quote unquote beat 'em ups felt like before you went to stuff like Streets of Rage or the like, but even then I love that they actually diversify the level structure up. Sometimes you have free movement up and down on the screen, other times you're locked onto a single plane, playing more like a classic early to mid 80s beat 'em up, and I do like that they vary the gameplay up in there. And that's the best part about something like an MSU1 port. It is every bit as fun as the game you remember. None of the mechanics have been changed. It plays exactly like Double Dragon 2. If you put it into an NES or load it up on the MiSTer FPGA NES core, you just get more improvements, and that is always awesome. So when people ask what is the point of an MSU1 port to Super Nintendo, the point is why not do it? It's fun. The developers like Rumbleminze love to do it, and you get a classic game just with more features and more quality of life improvements. But again, it is still Double Dragon, so it's still going to cheese you in the exact same way. When you get here, it's not the worst thing in the world, but once this boss comes up, or this character here, definitely just looks like Machete to me. He can stun lock you in the corner, just absolutely decimate your entire life bar, which can feel a little bit unfair, but that is how accurate the port is. The same cheese strats are going to work for you, and the same cheese strats are going to work for the actual CPU controlled players, and that's one of those things. Absolutely love the character design, but can definitely stun lock you and stagger you into death. But if you get to the left hand side of him, it becomes easier. But again, these ports are just so incredible because it is quite the heavy lift. This game uses a specific mapper that is a little bit harder to get over to something like Super Nintendo, but Rumbleminze was able to do it. You'll see even there, falling in that pit, drive you a little bit nuts. You just need to jump over and get through this other door here to continue on with the game. So every once in a while the game will definitely cause you to take an extra death, and that continue feature is going to be the lifesaver of your game. Pun very much intended. But one more soundtrack sample, because again the MSU1 sound support in Double Dragon 2 really is what's selling me on this entire title. 30 seconds and I'll be right back to show you a little bit more of the game and its port. The entire soundtrack in MSU1 just sounds like a straight homage to the 80s in the best way possible, and you'll see here some of the hardest enemies in the game are just going to be some of these jumps. You have to almost be pixel perfect, they will drive you nuts, and it's one of those things. It just was an area of Double Dragon that would drive you insane back in the day, and it has not changed here for better or worse. It is still the exact same game, but again, I love ports like this, and that MSU1 soundtrack just sounds like something that would have been in a Lethal Weapon movie or any other 80s buddy cop movie back in the day. The synthesizers, the jazz, the overall saxophone and trumpet sounds just make you think that you're playing an 80s action movie come to life, and that's basically what Double Dragon was. But do remember, again, do not take too many foul deaths here. You will see I'm at my last life, and the next playable character is going to go ahead and knock me clean off to my death. But I will leave a link to Rumbleminze's page down below so you can grab this game and check it out. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but we're done and I'm dead. Bye-bye.